Welcome to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws, the podcast that cuts through the rubbish to explore the world of neurodiversity. I'm your host, Nic King.
And I'm your host, Kate Fox, and together we're here to explore, understand, and celebrate being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. From ADHD and autism to dyslexia and other quirky brains, we talk about it all.
And go off on tangents. So, whether you're neurodivergent, love someone who is, or you're just curious about neurodivergent minds, you are in the right place.
Let's get ready to juggle some words and maybe even a few chainsaws, metaphorically, of course. Welcome to the latest edition of Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. I'm Kate Fox. She is Nic King. And we're going to be talking about how far on your identity list your neurodivergent identity comes. So, Nic, you said you had a question that you would ask to ascertain this.
So, sometimes, depending on the room that I'm in, when I'm training people, I ask them to sort of write a list of how they identify. And I don't mean sort of within certain groups, but if you approach somebody, you'd be like, I am, neurodivergent. I'm a parent. I'm self-employed. I'm northern. And that's probably roughly where my list is. I think if I was to do it in proper order, but again, there is a level where it would depend what environment I'm in. But I probably wouldn't start with neurodivergent. I would probably either start with parent or self-employed, depending on what room I was in. But neurodivergence would definitely make my top three. And if I was going to throw another one in there, I'm quite regularly called the panda lady. The woman with the bears, them. And I'm like, and I'll take that. That's fine. I've embraced my new identity as the panda lady. But
that's good.
It's interesting because it's really good to judge a room by how far they put up something that you could consider putting yourself within a minority group. I often think it's interesting how far people put up their job in their list as part of their fundamental identity. So there we go. If I was training you, Kate, what would your list be?
Well, and before I say that, I should just clarify for any listener going, why is Nic the panda lady? It's not that she eats bamboo or rolls down hills playfully while sneezing. It's because of her training program for young people in accepting their neurodivergent identity. Neurobears, see, that was good. Professional old radio person, not assuming that our listeners know all the things. Anyway, sorry, right. Again, yeah, it completely depends on the context how I would answer this. I think because it's so connected to my professional identity, I think I would say northern mostly first, and then I would say poet second, very entwined with my identity. It's child free, it feels very important, and then neurodivergent or DHD, depending on the context as to how specific I was going to be. But there are still contexts where it's interesting. There's a context that I'm operating in that I'm very much enjoying at the moment, but I notice that my neurodivergent identity is not part of it. I don't bring it up. And I'm just having a little think about that. We'll talk more about that. But also I'm noting neither of us being, as we have noted before, white, cis women are putting our sexuality or our gender, actually, in that list. Is that because we are taking it as read? Because we are...
Oh, no, we can't take mine as read because quite often, because I'm called Nic, I use she, they. Not that I particularly don't identify out of cis womanhood, but for those who have never seen me, I have incredibly short hair. Let's talk about flat shoes. Many people have often assumed, and also vicely, when my husband has been in certain workplaces, when he has talked about their partner Nick, which is how he refers to me, a lot of people have assumed I am male. A lot of people assume I'm male when I sign off emails. Um,
Mm.
so it's vaguely it's vaguely on my list, but it doesn't make the top five.
Interesting. Yeah. And it if I feel as ambivalent about having to it's definitely become more complicated, this gender thing, the more I'm in neuroaffirming space, because then I'm with more people who are having what feels to me more of a
Mhm.
wrestle with being able to just casually state their identity and know that they are safe to do that.
Mhm.
And that an impact for me is, I don't know, it's really putting me off wanting to say, well, I'm just a woman. Oh, I've got, because actually, I almost want to say, do you know what? I acknowledge that gender is fluid, it's complicated. It's fluid, and we're all a bit overly concerned about it, actually. And please don't think I'm a Karen. That might be a little thing underneath me being a woman now. That's a bit wimpy, isn't it? If
What,
I
being called
say,
a Karen?
yeah, well, I want to, I don't know, it's almost like I want to say, just because I'm like and my age doesn't help. So I'm, how old am I? Nearly 50. And there's a kind of, I want to affirm,
Are you worried about not coming across as an ally?
yes, yes, that's it. So if I say
Right.
woman, I'm like going, ooh, possibly. See what I mean?
Right, okay, fair.
Yeah,
I can see that. Like,
yeah.
I think sometimes, yeah, it's yeah, because obviously the neurodivergent community and the LGBTQ plus community are the same community because like I think it's 38% of our community. I want to drag that off the top of my head and could have looked it up before the podcast. Um, identifies as the gender they were born and as straight. So actually within our community, you're the minority group.
I'm the minority. Yeah, but it has become because I'm like, oh, well, I do think I have, in fact. Oh, this whole swirly, I'm sure we'll have to do a podcast on this because I've been thinking about it more recently. So, comfet, new phrase to me, compulsory heterosexuality. I've existed within that, I think. My relationships have only been monogamous heterosexual relationships. On the other hand, I'm fairly demisexual, which
Mm.
means my ability to actually experiment outside of this compulsory heterosexuality is fairly limited. And I probably am, I think I am stubbornly heterosexual. It's a little bit annoying to me. I mean, I fancy Pete Wicks on Strictly Come
To be
Dancing.
honest, I was disappointed in you when you told me that, I must
Well,
admit.
exactly. I mean, Pete Wicks of all, I'm like, oh dear, body hormones, what are you doing? Like, there are parts of me that really do not approve of this at all. But I have to, now I'm tuning into my body more in the unmasking. It's tuning into this body that apparently fancies Pete Wicks. So, you know, these
Can we
things that
untune that one?
I, d- I think that unfortunately, in the spirit of radical self-acceptance, no, I have to radically accept that I actually fancy Pete Wick. I've said it a lot of times though. I
Yeah.
can't say it any more times. Um, but there is a fellow on Substack actually, really interesting sociologist who is looking at split attraction.
Hmm.
I feel like we're going off topic a bit. We should return because this is a whole other topic. But split attraction, looking at how people might have one identity that is their sexual identity and another that is their romantic identity in terms of attraction. And I think it's very possible that certainly we could say my attraction probably is split. I mean, I'm not romantically attracted to Pete Wicks. I'm not. Uh,
Maybe actually you've just got a kink for pink PVC that we haven't explored yet. You never know.
Maybe it was there before then, and that didn't help. Is all I'm saying. Um, so
I think though, I think the important thing to probably see and cover is that identity is fluid and it's fluid for your whole life and you are open and hopefully have the freedom to explore it because obviously in my 20s I wouldn't have identified as a parent because I wasn't. I wouldn't have identified as self-employed because I wasn't. Do you know what I mean? And they're now, they're in the top three. I did identify as neurodivergent because I had a dyslexia diagnosis at the time, but I still, in my very, very early 20s, probably wasn't quite on board for autism. Do you know what I mean? Because we were still, well, we were pre-2013 model for a start. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And the stereotype was real and prevalent. Um, and I was a bit weird, and maybe, and I was just talking to you this before, that like people embrace the word weird, and we have them here, and we've had them on podcast, and we're friends, and we know them. And I maybe would have identified with the word weird, and maybe even like presented that within my top 10 of things, but then I wouldn't do that now. And if we go back to me being a teenager, I'm some sort of weird semi-goth thing on the Newcastle Green, and that probably would have been in the top 5. But this is the thing, it's fluid, it's meant to be fluid. You are meant to grow and change and hopefully do a level of self-acceptance and wider acceptance, and hopefully you have the freedom to be able to do it.
Hopefully, and that's the thing, isn't it? A lot of some spaces, it does feel like you do have that freedom and you can kind of embrace the fluidity, maybe new fluidity of your identity. But there are a lot of spaces where it's not safe to do that, and people are not really going, oh, actually, I completely accept the ever shifting translocational positionality of your personal parameters. That would be probably an academic setting. Um, do you know what? Okay, so there is a word that I use in my head for my identity, and I don't tend to say it out loud, apart from in my show, actually, my Bigger on the Inside spoken word show, neuroqueer, because that covers the kind of, bit of a question mark around sexuality stuff. It goes a step beyond neurodivergent, and kind of embraces those. But is there any point in saying that in a setting where the only reaction is likely to be either
Mhm.
exactly, exactly. So maybe it does help me. It does actually help me to have that as a word to connect to. So, but I suppose we're also saying how far up is our neurodivergent identity, and so sometimes for me, it is actually the primary thing. And as it's increasingly a driver of my sense of mission in the world, like my mission is basically for there to help contribute to more neuro affirming awareness and spaces. That's it. Like that's become a very strong mission. And therefore, in order to do that, actually it's very helpful for me to primarily say I'm doing that as a neurodivergent person. However, in certain situations, I'm still struggling with remembering it for myself, or maybe, or knowing that I might encounter other people's prejudices and stigmas around it. And that is really difficult. And that's not, I've just heard of a new book that's come out that some people are recommending that I'm unhelpfully not able to give you all the information about because it was just vaguely on Blue Sky a minute ago. How to navigate therapists as an autistic person, because that is real. If you're not definitely seeing an autistic or neuroaffirming therapist, whoa, so you're dealing with your identity, aspects of your identity, they may not be on board with them at all. I was just having a conversation with someone recently about how difficult that is. Now, that is a much more charged and fraught situation, or a school and educational situation. And because I'm not often in those fraught, charged situations where my identity is like, oh, this is really important, I think that makes me forget. Hence the village hotel in Hull incident. Shall I share the incident?
I
Or do you
think
want
we
to?
should share this incident. I think particularly in the light of where Sunflower Lanyard podcast and the fact that we got feedback from that we've kind of slightly held for you to tell your Holiday Inn story. I think it is important to let's share.
Yes. Well, basically, and I suppose, ironically, actually, on the drive to do a gig, literally while I'm kind of driving along, going to do a gig, and I was thinking, do you know what? At the moment, I'm in so many neuro-affirming spaces, and I'm doing my show, and I feel so accepted everywhere, and lots of my friends are neurodivergent. I hardly even feel autistic at all, and my sensory environments are so relaxing. Now, I mean, we do know in any situation, if you're thinking anything like that about anything, oh, I'm so lucky that this thing that was a thing is not a thing. Obviously, the thing that you just thinking is not a thing is going to be a thing, isn't it? So I am checking out of the hotel in the morning and I'm querying that there is a £5 parking charge separate to the hotel booking that I've already paid on booking.com. And it's a slightly complicated conversation of me going, well, you'd think that would be mentioned. And the receptionist going, well, it's because you booked through booking.com. You should have booked directly. And I was thinking, well, obviously, but I didn't know that, did I? Anyway, suddenly a massive alarm blares. Honestly, an alarm as loud as the sort of alarm that I think the CIA would use to torture people. It was very, very loud. And from the reaction of the two receptionists, it was not supposed to be happening. And the receptionist I was stood next to was saying, oh, it's too loud. It's too... bang it, to some hapless man wandering by. So thus adding to the noise and confusion. But honestly, I did feel my brain actually just bits of it floated apart while the sound was happening, is the best I can say. And after probably only 20 seconds, the sound stopped. And the woman carries on talking to me. And I am masking, I suppose, because I suppose if I wasn't masking, but
You
I
would have
don't.
just been on the floor rocking.
Yes, exactly. And she's talking to me and she's using so many words. And the words did said, and I just said, so this is the only reason I disclosed. I said, oh, and if, in fact, not at this point, not quite. I said something like, I don't think I can discuss the parking charge at this moment. And then she carried on speaking and concluded with something like, have you not seen? Look there, showing me the parking charge that I needed to pay that had now come up. Oh, sorry, I'm not narrating this very well. I said very irritably. So sounding very irritable is one of my main, I have just had a actual meltdown tells. And I irritably said, okay, I don't need to hear any more about the parking charge. Can I just pay it and go? And it was about as irritable as that I said it. And that's when she said, well, can you not see he's rung up the parking charge now? You can just pay it there. So it was her second. Have you not seen that? Can you not see that? And I said, sorry, I actually just felt like my brain had melted. I'm autistic. Not really a voluntary disclosure, really, because I didn't think it through. She says, oh, I understand. My son's autistic. Oh, well, and then she uses, like, honestly, loads more words. I can't tell you what they were, no idea. She's going on and on and on. And I'm just thinking, please stop talking. And then she said something like, you should have told us. You should have said you were autistic. So it's her third in her rhetorical pattern of, you should have said. And I looked at her then and I said, what are you saying? I should have shouted out in the middle of an alarm that was melting my brain that I was autistic. And then I noticed she was staring at me. And and she said, well, we something like we didn't know. And and then it was all very. And then she said, "But I understand. My son's autistic. I've done training, um, and so that's why I'm giving you eye contact. I wouldn't have actually noticed she was giving me eye contact because I didn't
Because
have
you
a.
were giving it a rack.
Well, exactly. And then I looked at her. She's really staring. But it was actually very interesting because there is, I'll say, there was a slight possibility that me noticing that she was really staring at me did actually help me refocus, only because it was so incongruous and ridiculous. And I said, like, this is quite bad. I then just went, your poor son, your poor son. And I know, and I think I said some other things, but I can't remember, like not many things. And she then wasn't there. I mean, you can tell from this narrative, it's almost like the fractured narrative of a slightly trauma narrative, really. Anyway, her companion receptionist, a bloke, he just goes very gently, he goes, are you all right? And I was able to pause and realize that my body was shaking and that was not all right. And I said, oh, I'm not. I said, and I was about to drive, but I can't drive. No, I can't drive. I'm going to have a coffee and sit down. And he went, yeah, just breathe. And I breathed. And then I said to him, tell her that's what to do. What you're doing, that's what to do, not what she did. And I went off and sat in a little Starbucks franchise and had an emotional support pan au chocolat.
Love what you're hearing? Want to interact with us? Want to show your support? You can do all of that via our website, Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws, where you can leave us a comment, you can send us an email, or you can leave a little tip via our PayPal link. And we appreciate all your interaction, support, and love.
Mind saying
And
that somebody telling me to breathe wouldn't have gone down.
oh, really, I know
Oh
it
no,
did. You see, in that moment, it
I would have
did
had the urge to
work
punch
for me.
them.
Oh, yeah. But I suppose it helped that I wasn't angry with him because he
Yeah.
hadn't, you know, and also because he did say it so calmly. So, in summary, sorry, that was a really long story, but I then was jolted into this realization of, whoa, this aspect of my identity, if I name it and own it, and bear in mind, I normally still say neurodivergent, um, can be dangerous to acknowledge. And for me, it is not usually dangerous because I'm not in a school, I'm not held in a sort of environment where I am legally required to be there. I'm not seeking healthcare. It was just one brief moment in a hotel where luckily I had my own means of exiting the situation. And I do have much better self-regulation strategies now, enough to recognize that I was really, well, I don't know whether the discombobulation was just the alarm or the alarm and the receptionist. I know the receptionist that was bad, but I don't know if was that nervous system bad or was it just really ridiculous, annoying, offensive, and I did experience it almost as an assault. Oh, okay. That was probably nervous system bad.
I think it probably was.
Mm.
But it can feel like that. It, it can. It does. And it's upsetting and it's hard. I'm glad you didn't drive. I'm glad that you were at a place where you're like, I should definitely not drive.
In the olden days, I wouldn't have recognized any of what was happening there. I wouldn't have recognized that it was, nervous system stuff that needed to calm down. I wouldn't have realized what the effect of the alarm had been.
Yeah,
Um,
alarm.
I think all of that would have passed me by and I'd have just got straight in my car. But the confusion of it was her insistence. I've done training. It's my son. But then I took all my, oh, we have to suffer this in society as autistic people out on her, really, in a way. I mean, quite mildly, but just the incongruence, me knowing that eye contact is probably the least helpful thing that you can do to an autistic person who has just been sensorily overwhelmed. And by a strange quirk, in that moment, it wasn't exactly, but yeah.
I think there's an experience across minority identities where we significantly concern ourselves with our behavior in a moment of distress to a level that I think is significantly more thought through, thought about afterwards than people who don't have to worry about sort of being in a minority, being perceived. I see a lot of people behaving significantly worse than people who are from minority groups, who are disabled, who are all of them, black, brown, LGBTQ plus, stuff that you really can't mask and you can't hide. And I often see their behavior called out because, and often I feel like it's really minor in comparison to how I see other people behaving. And I think not only do we internalize that and try and mask and adjust our behavior to a level and a standard that isn't the majority at all, and that there is almost higher expectations in some bizarre ways of how we behave, whilst also a pretense at understanding when it goes wrong as well. And often it is a pretense at understanding. It's not true understanding because of the double empathy problem, and you can't understand anyone else's like lived experience fully.
Oh, that's a really powerful point about minorities being held to a higher standard. And I suppose going back to her comment of, well, you should have said you were autistic, which felt so unjust. It's like, oh, is it my, first of all, that would have been a particularly hard moment for me to say it, and the alarm would still have been going off,
Yeah.
even if I'd said I was autistic. And um, it didn't, it, well, coming back to the sunflower lanyards, there was the irony of that podcast had just gone out the day before, and I'd still been ambivalent about having my sunflower lanyard. It wasn't in my bag. However, again, I couldn't have reached into my bag at that moment and gone, oh, I think I will now put my sunflower lanyard on just while my synapses fly into another galaxy. That's a wise thing to do. Like, of course I wasn't going to do that. Even if I had an autism card, I wasn't going to present it there and then. And but if I had been wearing one,
You just never know if it would have been any different, do you?
I know, because in that instance, if I'd been wearing one, she might have stared at me all the time from the beginning of the interaction due to believing that this was some sort of helpful thing. Um, yeah, I don't want to put anyone else off, but when it comes back to that question of where is your identity in your list of things, in some ways, in that moment of suffering
Yeah.
and stigmatization and overwhelm. And even though on this podcast we very deliberately, and I think rightly, kind of affirm aspects of our identity which are resistant aspects, let's say. Well, basically, we don't focus on the suffering stuff. We talk about it quite a lot, but we don't focus on it. In that instance, arguably, I've never been more autistic because all the things that can constitute what society anyway thinks of as autistic experience were all happening at once.
Yes. I have to say that part, when you're talking about like getting it out of your bag, and we had some feedback about, and it was from, were they American? Were they Canadian? They were Canadian. And they were talking about how they put a sunflower lanyard on their son, but he hadn't liked it round his neck, and I am on board with that. Because it's, touchy things. And in the moment, because they were in airports, which is one of the spaces we were like, sunflower lanyards, airports, good idea. Um, and he threw his shoes at the security officer.
Oh,
And they profusely apologized, apparently in a very Canadian manner. And then attach sort of the lanyard to the backpack, which is if I'm out, I tend to put it on a bag as well. And I don't know if it's a Canada thing because they were talking about how like they would like more options for things. So in the UK, we definitely have like bracelets that are like that rubbery, like sort of material, and we have bracelets that are like a fabricy type material, and there's definitely badges. And there's other things, and there's also ones with LGBTQ plus flags on. In fact, there might be more. I have a flag one, um, or two. Um, so there is, I don't know if there's more over here and less over in Canada, but I am going to Google for you. Um, but they came back with sort of like their thoughts was that, it was a good idea, not enough available products to be useful for everyone. And we just like they didn't know whether in that moment that like whether it was enough, whether wearing it because he'd been completely overwhelmed by being put in this queue with a like ton of other families and kids and stuff like that, and then thrown his shoes at security at an airport. Um, it's just you don't. The trouble is, if you don't have it on, you do have it on. If you do tell or don't tell, you never know how the other, there's not the parallel universe.
no, and actually, what it highlights for me, and thank you, that was Karen Ulrich, I believe, who also said, love the podcast, absolutely do my happy squeal several times every listen. So thank you for that, Karen. No matter what tools we have to identify or not identify us, it's not actually about these things. It comes down to people's ability to recognise our needs, or just to generally recognize that other humans may have different ways of processing, being and experiencing the world, and being able to kind of grant that, being able to hold neuroaffirming space, basically, which clearly my woman in the hotel never would have been able to do, because she was trained in an entirely different way. I am loving the idea of sunflower lanyard on bag, though. Maybe that would help me with my kind of reluctance to have it about my person, which is, bit of internalized ableism, bit of a variety of things. But I could put it on my bag.
Okay. Yeah. Because I always travel one in my bag, but on my bag as well. And then I would probably both the kids are happy to wear one in the main. They don't wear them all the time. It is literally, we're talking London airports. Obviously, the eldest can wear one whenever they want because they're 15, almost 16, and they have agency to do so whenever. But no, I think on bags is helpful. And when I went on the website, because I bought them for when we went down to London last year because it seemed like a good idea. I was quite impressed with the range actually here. Maybe not Canada, but I was impressed with the range because touching necks. No,
Yeah,
no, no
dangling about the
touching necks.
place. I say that with my giant dangly earrings. Oh, maybe sunflower. Maybe I am neurodivergent earrings.
I mean, yeah, we can. But this is the thing, even if it's really high up your identity, even if you disclose, even though you have absolutely no legal obligation in any situation to do so, and I think we are quite regularly pressured into doing so because people think we're being difficult, people think we're being rude, people think, this, well, people think.
Or don't think
Or don't think.
as well. Yeah.
um, that we feel the need to disclose, but then you are completely at the hands of whatever level of knowledge that they think they have and whatever level of training that they may have received.
Indeed. And it takes me back to a situation recently, talking about going back to the pronouns. Someone was saying they would only really feel safe disclosing their pronouns, because I was saying, should I, in groups, invite people to share their pronouns? And they said, well, it would take a while until I knew it was okay to say, look, I have these pronouns, and they're not what you're expecting, for whatever reason. In a similar way to, again, it can be very difficult if someone is not expecting you as their idea of a neurodivergent person to
Yeah.
show it. It's that disjunct, isn't it? I mean, recently I was in a situation where someone, I will talk about this more specifically at another time, but anyway, someone in a group situation talked about someone having Asperger's, which was, it's not a red flag, but many people now don't use the term Asperger's. They've moved on from it. And they referred to someone having Asperger's and seeming not to have any emotions because of this. So I felt like I'm not now going to disclose in this situation where I am just not going to. So it remains complicated and translocationally difficult. I just don't get to say that word often enough. Sorry to repeat it.
And May in 2025, you have enough safe spaces to disclose your full identity openly and it be accepted. And definitely no fire alarms. Thanks for tuning in to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. We're so glad you joined us today to explore the fascinating world of neurodivergence with your hosts, me, Nic King.
And me, Kate Fox. If our conversation sparked a thought, a question, or even a smile, don't keep it to yourself. Drop us a line at hello@neurotypicalsdon'tjugglechainsaws.co.uk or visit our website, neurotypicalsdon'tjugglechainsaws.co.uk, to write in. We'd love to hear from you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, consider leaving us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform.
Until next time, keep embracing the unique ways you juggle the chainsaws of life.